Wait. You're telling me humans have just been sitting on the sidelines this whole time? The chamber went silent. General Corvo of the Zin Consortium stared at the shimmering holographic map. Every other race within the intergalactic coalition had already bled themselves dry, sacrificing fleets, resources, and generations of lives in the endless war against the Kidari. Yet in the background humanity had lingered. They had sent food, medics, and supplies, yes. Their ships had ferried fuel and parts across the stars. But direct combat. Not a single human warship had joined the fight. Till now. Yes, General, came the calm reply from Admiral Merrick of their Chak Union. His scaled features unreadable. Humanity formally announced its entry into combat operations 10 minutes ago. Corvo rubbed at his temples, stunned. He had heard stories of human ferocity. Rumors passed through war-weary lips, dismissed as the usual Deathworld myths. Now, with reality staring him in the face, he felt an unsettling mixture of dread and anticipation. Why now? And more importantly, what did the humans plan to do in a war that had already dragged on for years? Show me their opening maneuvers, Corvo demanded, his tone sharper than intended. The galaxy map shifted, zooming toward the burning front lines. The Kidari fleet had entrenched itself in the Kiar systems, daring challengers to try breaching their walls of steel and fire. And then, like faint ripples against a storm, humanity appeared. Coalition commanders leaned closer as the human fleet materialized at the edge of the battlefield. Their ships looked small, sleek, compact, and lacking the grandiose cannons and sprawling armor plates other species adored. To the untrained eye, they appeared hopelessly underpowered. That's it, someone muttered with open disdain. Corvo narrowed his eyes. A lone command vessel, a handful of destroyers, a squadron of escorts. If this was the full measure of humanity's might, then they were mad. The Kidari wasted no time, shifting formations to swat aside the newcomers. To them, the humans were nothing more than a trivial distraction. No one had pierced their defenses in years. Then it began. Corvo blinked in disbelief as the human ships moved. Precision bordering on artistry. Speed that cut through the void like blades of light. Within moments, coalition comm channels lit up with panicked reports. Electromagnetic pulses. Sensor disruption. For the Kidari, it was like being blindfolded in the middle of a storm. What are they doing? Admiral Merrick asked, his usual composure cracking, voice laced with awe. Electronic warfare, Corvo murmured, uncertain even as he said it. But I've never seen it unleashed like this. The Kidari's fleets faltered. Their targeting grids flickered out. Their defensive screens sputtered into silence. Human ships slipped between them like shadows, delivering high-velocity strikes with eerie calm. It wasn't brute force. It wasn't attrition. It was elegant. Warfare distilled into something more akin to a dance than slaughter. Sir, the Kidari's outer defenses are collapsing. A comms officer gasped, eyes wide as his console flooded with reports. Corvo leaned forward, breath caught in his throat. Would the humans seize their momentum, or retreat? The answer came in a heartbeat. The human fleet accelerated, flowing into the gaps they themselves had torn open. Their strategy shifted fluidly, every maneuver anticipating Kidari countermeasures before they even materialized. How are they doing this? One officer stammered as another sector crumbled under human assault. It's as if they already knew exactly where to strike, another whispered. Corvo could only marvel. The humans didn't fight like anyone else. Where others threw endless waves of ships, hoping numbers would grind the enemy down, humanity struck with surgical precision. Critical systems were silenced one by one. Entire warships reduced to helpless hulks, left drifting as if gutted of their senses. What kind of weaponry are they using? An officer demanded, voice caught between horror and awe. Their arsenal looks conventional, but... A tactical analyst stammered. They're using weapons we all recognize, but in ways we never imagined. As the minutes dragged on, The coalition command chamber dissolved into stunned silence. 1 hour. Only 1 hour had passed since humanity entered the fray, and the once mighty Qadari armadas were collapsing into a fractured, fleeing disaster. Not even the most hopeful coalition predictions had ever imagined effectiveness on this scale. Corvo's eyes stayed locked on the shifting holographic map as red Qadari strongholds flickered out one after another. This wasn't victory. It was vivisection. Humanity wasn't merely defeating the enemy. They were unraveling the Qadari's entire military doctrine. Sector Gamma has fallen, the comms officer reported, his voice cutting the silence. And reports indicate 0 human losses. Impossible, Morak hissed, his scaled features twitching with disbelief. 0 casualties. That cannot be sustained. Corvo swallowed hard, his throat dry as his gaze clung to the tactical feed. The human fleet pressed forward without pause. Their ships danced through wreckage and slipped past incoming fire with an ease so fluid it looked almost playful. Another Qadari command cruiser vanished in a blossom of flame. No fluke. No luck. This was deliberate. Calculated. Terrifying. I don't understand, Corvo muttered, rubbing the back of his neck. If they weren't fighting alongside us all this time, what were they doing? Preparing. The voice was cold, analytical. All heads turned toward the doorway. A human officer stepped inside, clad in a plain, crisp uniform stripped of medals or ornament. His gaze was sharp, unreadable, scanning the room as if measuring every soul present. You call this a war, he continued, striding into the center. To us it is an exercise, a test of adaptability. Uneasy glances passed between the coalition commanders. His tone carried no arrogance, no boast, just a detached statement of fact. Corvo clenched his jaw, uncertain whether to respond with fury or respect. What's your objective? He demanded, voice tight. Why now? The human tilted his head slightly, as if choosing the simplest way to explain something obvious. Our objective, he said calmly, is to end this conflict in the most efficient manner possible. As for why now? We waited until you were ready to accept our methods. A chill ran down Corvo's spine. The words were soft, almost benign, yet carried a weight far heavier than their simplicity suggested. Ready? Morak scoffed bitterly. You think we were ready for this? The human's gaze shifted to the holographic map, where the last remnants of Qadari forces were being stripped apart piece by piece. His answer came flat, calm, undeniable. If you weren't, he said, this war would have ended long ago. Corvo stared at the glowing map, struggling to grasp what was unfolding. The humans were not just winning, they were pushing directly into the heart of Qadari territory with momentum that defied reason. And yet, as he watched, an unsettling thought crept into his mind. What kind of war had humanity been preparing for all these years? The coalition chamber stayed hushed, commanders transfixed by the surreal destruction playing out before them. Humanity's fleet didn't fight, it dissected. Every enemy weakness exposed, every gap exploited, every maneuver executed with eerie, almost supernatural precision. Report! Admiral Merrick barked at last, shattering the silence. What's the status of Qadari Central Command? The tactical officer's hands shook as he processed the data feeds. Central Command. It's failing, sir. Their shield arrays are gone. Human boarding pods are en route right now. Corvo's jaw tightened. The Qadari Central Command was a fortress, a citadel that had withstood years of assaults. Yet now, those invincible defenses were shattering like brittle glass beneath an unyielding hammer. Boarding pods. Merrick echoed, incredulous. His voice faltered with disbelief. They're going inside. The human officer gave a single measured nod. Yes, surgical strikes are more efficient than brute force. Our objective is control, not annihilation. Corvo glanced at him, a weight of dread pressing against his chest. These humans were nothing like the reckless warriors he'd imagined. They were methodical, cold, and terrifyingly effective. How are they doing this? Another coalition commander asked, voice trembling. We've fought the Qadari for years and barely cracked their defenses. And now this. Training, the human officer replied evenly. We've been preparing for scenarios like this long before we ever met the Qadari. Base combat, planetary invasions, electronic warfare, every variable, every possibility, drilled until instinct. Countermeasures, the human officer said evenly. It's all part of doctrine. Doctrine, Corvo echoed, narrowing his eyes. You make it sound as if you expected this war. The officer turned his gaze toward him, expression unreadable. Expected. Well, prepared for. Always. The words sent a cold ripple through the chamber. For the coalition, war had been forced upon them. An act of desperation, a battle to survive the Qadari onslaught. But humanity had been preparing for conflict as if it were inevitable. And now, as Corvo watched their fleet dismantle the Qadari defenses piece by piece, he realized this was not just power on display, it was control. General Corvo, a voice crackled across the comms, pulling him from his thoughts. A reconnaissance officer, stationed near the Qadari border. The flagship is moving, attempting retreat toward a fortified sector. Let me guess, Morak said bitterly. The humans have already accounted for this. The human officer didn't blink. Of course. They'll permit the retreat for now. A common tactic. Drive the enemy into their last bastion, let them believe they're safe. Then strip away even that illusion. You're toying with them, Corvo asked, disbelief lacing his tone. Not toying, the officer corrected, voice flat. Ensuring collapse is absolute. No recovery, no regrouping. This war dragged on because everyone else fought piecemeal. We don't. Corvo turned back toward the map. The Qadari fleet was scrambling, their formations unraveling in panic. The humans had broken every unspoken rule of this long, grinding conflict, operating on a level their enemy had never encountered. Reports of ground activity, the tactical officer blurted, eyes wide. Human soldiers have landed on key Qadari worlds. Morak hissed low. Already. We've barely secured orbital dominance. How? Parallel operations, the human officer answered, arms folded as he studied the map. While fleet assets dismantle enemy ships, ground forces secure installations. We train to overwhelm across multiple fronts at once. Corvo's stomach knotted. Every coalition campaign had been sequential, space superiority first, then months of attrition before any ground assault. But the humans had mastered both simultaneously, executing their plan with unnerving precision. Ground reports incoming, the comms officer whispered. Planetary defenses neutralized. Minimal resistance. Corvo nearly choked on his disbelief. Qadari planets were fortresses, shielded, bristling with weapons, guarded by armies the coalition had failed to topple after years of effort. Yet here the humans were, taking them in hours. What kind of soldiers are they? Someone muttered, giving voice to the thought everyone shared. Adaptable, the officer replied, tone matter of fact. We train them not only to fight but to think, to analyze, to exploit weakness in real time. A hush fell over the chamber. Humanity had reduced war to a science, victory not through sheer force, but through precision, adaptability, inevitability. It was terrifying. What's their next move? Corvo asked before he could stop himself. The flagship, the officer said without hesitation. We'll let it retreat, then cut off every escape. Once isolated, Qadari command will either surrender or be erased. So this is it? Merrick asked, his scaled features pale. They're already anticipating the endgame. The human allowed the faintest smirk, the first crack in his impassive mask. Not anticipating, he said softly. Enacting. This war ended the moment we stepped in. Uneasy glances darted between coalition commanders. It wasn't merely human weapons or tactics that unsettled them. It was the mindset. The way they approached war not as chaos, but as an equation. Every variable accounted for. Every outcome predicted. And as the chamber fell into silence once more, the humans continued their work. Their advance pressed onward. One by one, Qadari-held worlds winked out on the holographic map like dying stars in a vast night sky. The display now centered on the Qadari flagship, retreating not before a swarm, but pursued by a single, relentless, calculated force. What happens if the Qadari surrender? Corvo asked, his voice hushed, almost dreading the answer. The human officer's eyes narrowed. Then they live, he replied simply. We don't fight to exterminate. We fight to win, and to ensure no one ever dares challenge us again. Corvo swallowed hard. The logic was chilling, the philosophy colder still. Humanity hadn't entered the battlefield just to claim victory. They were rewriting the very definition of it. On the map, the Qadari's final stronghold flickered at the edge of collapse. And yet Corvo could not shake the unease coiling in his chest. This felt less like the end of a war, and more like the beginning of something far larger, something none of them yet understood. The chamber fell into tense silence as the holographic projection zoomed in on the flagship. Once a towering symbol of Qadari dominance, it now appeared small, broken, its hull scarred, its thrusters sputtering weakly. Its proud escort fleet was nothing more than drifting wreckage scattered across space. Corvo glanced around the command center. Coalition officers sat frozen in disbelief, some wide-eyed with awe, others pale with fear, but none able to look away from the humans' unfolding strategy. Only 5 hours ago, the Qadari had seemed untouchable. Now their defeat was no longer hypothetical. It was inevitable. Human fleet is converging on the flagship's fallback point, the tactical officer reported, his voice trembling as though he could scarcely believe the words himself. They've surrounded the sector, every escape corridor sealed. Reinforcements? Corvo asked, though he already knew the answer. None, sir. Supply chains, reserves. All cut off by the humans. The officer shook his head, disbelief still etched into every syllable. It's over. They're trapped. On the map, the human fleet formed a perfect encirclement. No bluster, no intimidation, only silent geometry. It was a statement more final than words. There is no escape. The human officer, calm as ever, tilted his head. Surrender terms have been transmitted. The Qadari have 5 minutes to comply. After that, final neutralization. Morak's scales rippled as he hissed in disdain. And if they refuse, you'll slaughter them. If they reject the terms, the human said evenly, then yes. But understand, our goal is not destruction. It's resolution. We end conflicts so decisively they cannot begin again. Corvo's stomach clenched. To the humans, war was not waged for glory or vengeance. It was an instrument, cold, efficient, final, a tool to shape the galaxy until defiance itself became unthinkable. The Qadari flagship is responding, the comms officer reported suddenly, tension lacing every word. They're requesting terms. A murmur swept through the command chamber. Could it be? After years of endless bloodshed, was this truly the end? Put it through, Corvo ordered, struggling to maintain composure. The display shifted, revealing the bridge of the Qadari flagship. Their commander appeared, uniform disheveled, eyes ablaze with fury and fear. His voice trembled as he forced the words out. We acknowledge your terms, human, he spat. But know this. You prevail only through trickery and deceit, not strength. The human officer stepped forward into view. His expression never changed. His voice was calm, steady, merciless in its clarity. You lost because you clung to old doctrines, outdated by eons, he said. Strength is not brute force. Strength is adaptability. Strength is mastery of every aspect of conflict. We offered peace long before today. You refused. The Qadari commander glared, his defiance hanging by a thread. For a moment, it seemed he might explode in fury, rejecting the terms out of pure spite. But then his eyes swept across his bridge, landing on the weary faces of his officers, and the weight of reality pressed down. The humans had cornered them, stripped them of every advantage, and now the entire galaxy waited for this single decision. "Very well," the commander muttered, bowing his head. "We surrender." A shockwave ran through the coalition command chamber. Just like that, it was over. Years of relentless conflict, countless lives lost, and endless resources burned away. All ended in a surrender less than 5 hours after humanity entered the fray. The finality of it left Corvo speechless. "Transmission confirmed," the CO's officer reported, struggling to mask his disbelief. "The Kidari have ordered all forces to stand down." The human officer nodded, turning to the gathered commanders. "The war is officially concluded," he stated calmly. "Our fleets will begin stabilizing Kidari systems. Coalition forces may withdraw to their own territories." Corvo opened his mouth, but words faltered. Felt unreal. The Kidari had fallen not after a grueling campaign, but in a single surgical strike lasting mere hours. Humanity had accomplished in one decisive move what the galaxy had failed to achieve in years. But more than that, they had rewritten the very nature of warfare. "How?" Corvo finally whispered, his voice trembling. "How do you prepare for something like this, to end a war so swiftly?" The human officer regarded him with a steady, unreadable gaze. "We come from a world where conflict is woven into existence," he explained. "Survival demanded adaptation, invention, and ending threats with finality. War is not our purpose. It is a tool. For peace others will think twice about disturbing." Corvo nodded slowly, letting the words settle. It was more than strength. It was preparation, foresight, and ruthless precision. Humanity had refined their craft, hardened their minds, and embraced efficiency unlike any other. They hadn't simply joined the war, they had transcended it. Victory, they proved, was not for those who fought the longest, but for those who fought the smartest. As the coalition officers dispersed, Corvo watched the human fleet regroup on the holographic display. They moved with the same quiet coordination they had shown in battle, already shifting into post-war objectives. Stabilization, reconstruction. They were not conquerors seeking glory, but pragmatists laying the foundation for what came next. For the first time in years, Corvo felt an unfamiliar spark of hope tinged with fear. Humanity had revealed what they could do, and the galaxy would never be the same. They had redrawn the rules of war, carving a path to a peace born not of exhaustion, but of calculated brilliance. The war ended not with spectacle, but with revelation. Humanity had always known exactly when and how to win.